Sometimes even to live is an act of courage. Seneca. What if I told you that the people who walked away from your life weren't a loss, but a protection? What if the silence, the distance, the sudden absence that confused you was not punishment, but precision? You didn't see it then. You questioned yourself. You replayed conversations. You wondered what you did wrong. But Stoic wisdom teaches something unsettling and liberating at the same time. Not everything that leaves you is meant to stay, and not everything you lose is a loss. You see, you judge events by how they feel in the moment. Life judges them by where they lead. The Stoics understood that removal often precedes growth, and separation often precedes clarity. Some people are taken out of your path because their presence would have delayed your discipline, weakened your character, or distracted you from becoming who you're meant to be. This video is not about bitterness. It's about perspective. It's about understanding why certain connections collapse just when you thought you needed them most, and how that collapse is often the turning point toward inner strength, self-mastery, and peace. Watch this video till the very end, because the final insight may completely change how you view loss, rejection, and the people who no longer walk beside you. Number 1, some people were blocking your growth, not supporting it. There's a quiet truth most people resist for a long time. Not everyone who stays near you is meant to grow with you. Some are familiar, comfortable, even affectionate, yet they quietly limit who you're becoming. And when those people disappear, suddenly or slowly, it feels confusing at first, painful even. But over time, if you're willing to look honestly, you begin to sense something deeper at work. God saw what you couldn't, and what was removed wasn't love or support. It was resistance disguised as closeness. You weren't wrong for holding on. You weren't weak for hoping they would change or align. But growth has a way of revealing friction. The Stoics understood this well. Wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Sometimes the obstacle isn't a hardship or an external challenge. Sometimes it's a person who benefits from you staying smaller, quieter, or uncertain. Not always intentionally, but effect matters more than intent. If your energy was constantly drained, redirected, or dulled around certain people, that wasn't companionship. That was containment. Here's the uncomfortable part you need to accept if you want to mature. Not all losses are punishments. Some are corrections. You may have thought loyalty meant endurance at any cost. You may have confused proximity with alignment. Stoicism invites you to examine reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. Epictetus said, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and you will go on well." When people are removed from your life, especially without closure, the lesson isn't to obsess over why. The lesson is to ask who you're becoming now that the resistance is gone. Some people don't cheer for your growth because it disrupts the version of you they were comfortable with. Your discipline challenges their excuses. Your clarity exposes their confusion. Your calm unsettles their chaos. Again, this doesn't make them villains. It makes them incompatible with your next level. God doesn't always remove people because they're bad. Sometimes He removes them because you're ready. And readiness often looks like discomfort before it feels like relief. You might notice that once certain people are gone, your mind gets quieter. Decisions feel less heavy. You hesitate less before doing what you know is right. That's not coincidence. Seneca warned, associate with people who are likely to improve you. When someone consistently pulls you back into doubt, distraction, or emotional turbulence, they're not neutral. They're shaping you, just not in the direction you claim to want. Growth requires space, and sometimes space only arrives after separation. This is where you must resist bitterness. Bitterness keeps you tethered to what was removed. Gratitude releases you, not gratitude for the pain, but for the clarity it produced. Stoicism teaches acceptance, not passivity. You don't have to romanticize loss, but you do need to extract wisdom from it. Ask yourself honestly, who did I shrink around? Where did I silence my instincts to preserve harmony? What patterns did I tolerate that slowed my momentum? These questions aren't meant to shame you. They're meant to sharpen you. You're not meant to carry everyone into your future. That doesn't make you selfish. It makes you responsible. Reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. You don't control who stays. You do control who you become because of who left. If God removed them, your task now is not to look back, but to build forward with intention. There's also a deeper spiritual lesson here that aligns perfectly with Stoic discipline. Attachment clouds judgment. When you cling to people out of fear, fear of loneliness, fear of change, fear of starting over, you abandon reason. Stoicism teaches voluntary discomfort for a reason. It trains you to stand on your own footing, to be whole without leaning excessively on others. When certain people exit your life, you're being invited to develop inner sufficiency. Not isolation, sufficiency. To integrate this lesson, you need to act deliberately. First, stop narrating the loss as rejection. Reframe it as redirection. Words shape perception. Next, perform a daily inventory. At the end of each day, ask yourself, did my choices today move me toward growth or comfort, toward virtue or approval? This mirrors the nightly reflection practiced. It keeps you honest. It keeps you aligned. Another exercise is intentional solitude. Spend time without replacing what was lost immediately. Let the space teach you. Sit with the silence. Notice what rises when there's no one else influencing your emotional weather. This is where self-trust is rebuilt. Seneca wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." If you're constantly surrounded, you never hear yourself think. Solitude clarifies direction. You should also write, not about them, but about you. Write the standards you now choose to live by. Write the traits you respect in yourself. Write the non-negotiables you ignored before. This isn't nostalgia, it's architecture. You're designing the internal structure that determines who gets access to you going forward. Understand this clearly. God didn't remove those people to punish you with emptiness. He removed them to protect your momentum, to reduce interference, to create room for alignment, whether that alignment comes through new people, deeper purpose, or a stronger relationship with yourself. Stoicism doesn't promise comfort. It promises clarity, and clarity, once gained, is irreversible. So don't rush to replace what was removed. Don't chase explanations that keep you anchored to the past. Walk forward with steadiness. Let your growth be quiet. Let your habits speak. Let your discipline become your testimony. Some people were blocking your growth, not supporting it. And now that they're gone, your responsibility is simple but not easy. Become who you couldn't be while they were still there. Number 2, what felt like loss was actually protection. What felt like loss was actually protection, even if you couldn't see it at the time, especially then. You tend to measure loss by what disappeared from your hands, not by what was quietly removed from your path. That's human. The Stoics understood this blindness well. Reminded himself, whatever happens to you has been waiting to happen since the beginning of time. When something or someone is taken away, your first instinct is to resist the meaning of it. You label it unfair, painful, a mistake. But Stoic wisdom and a deeper trust in divine order asks you to consider a harder truth. Maybe it wasn't punishment at all. Maybe it was restraint. Maybe what left your life was blocking the version of you were meant to become. You don't feel protected in the moment of loss. You feel exposed, stripped, uncertain. That's because protection doesn't announce itself with comfort. It often arrives disguised as emptiness, as silence, as a door slammed shut when you were convinced it had to stay open. Epictetus said, "Don't seek for events to happen as you wish, but wish for them to happen as they do happen, and your life will go smoothly." That doesn't mean pretending the loss didn't hurt. It means understanding that your judgment of the event is not the event itself. The pain is real, yes, but the meaning you assign to it is optional. and meaning is where freedom begins. You tend to mourn what you lost without questioning what it was costing you to keep it. Energy, focus, integrity, peace, alignment. The Stoics were relentless about this accounting. Seneca warned, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Sometimes removal is mercy. Sometimes God sees erosion before collapse, distraction before decay, compromise before corruption. And so what feels like loss is actually interruption. A hand on your chest saying, "Not this way." This is where trust becomes a discipline, not a feeling. Trust is not passive acceptance. It's active cooperation with reality. Framed it beautifully when he wrote, "Accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny for what could more aptly fit your needs." When something leaves your life, the Stoic question is, "Why me?" It's, "What is this making room for?" That question shifts you from victimhood to agency. It returns power to your hands. You stop staring at what's gone and start listening to what remains. Loss feels like subtraction, but often it's refinement. Fire removes impurities. Distance restores clarity. Absence reveals dependency. You don't always notice how tightly you were clinging until your hands are forced open. And in that opening, something crucial happens. You begin to stand on what cannot be taken. Your character, your discipline, your values, your capacity to endure without bitterness. Epictetus was blunt about this. You may be bound, but your will is free. When external things fall away, the inner foundation is tested. Strength isn't built in abundance. It's forged when supports are removed. If you're honest with yourself, part of what hurts is not just what you lost, but the story you were telling yourself about it. The future you imagined, the certainty you borrowed from something external. Stoicism teaches you to build certainty inward. When God removes something, it's often because you were anchoring too much of your identity there. Protection, then, is redirection, of where you draw meaning, where you source worth, where you expect stability to come from. This is not about blind optimism, it's about trained perception. Seneca wrote, "A good person dyes events with their own color." You are not powerless in the face of loss. You are responsible for how you metabolize it. Do you let it harden you or deepen you? Do you shrink, or do you refine your standards, your boundaries, your habits? Loss becomes protection only if you cooperate with the lesson embedded inside it. One powerful exercise is voluntary reframing. Sit quietly and write down what was removed, not with emotion but with precision. Then ask yourself, what demand did this place on my time, attention, or integrity? Don't romanticize it, be exact. This trains you to see cost, not just comfort. Another practice is negative visualization, a core Stoic tool. Imagine that what was removed had stayed, not sentimentally but realistically. Observe how your days would look, your energy, your direction. This isn't to induce regret, but to dissolve illusion. You can also practice disciplined gratitude, not for the loss itself, but for what you retained, your breath, your agency, your ability to choose your next step. Practice this relentlessly, reminding himself that as long as he could reason, he could act in accordance with virtue. That's the Stoic anchor. No loss can touch that unless you allow it. What you're being invited to do now is to stop chasing restoration and start building alignment. Stop asking for things back and start asking for clarity. Ask yourself daily, what is required of me now? Not emotionally, practically, virtuously. Action restores dignity faster than explanation ever will. Small disciplines, clean routines, honest effort. These are how you honor protection after you recognize it. Over time, you'll notice something subtle. The ache changes shape. It loses urgency. It stops pulling you backward. That's not because the loss mattered less, but because you matter more to yourself. You become less attached to outcomes and more committed to conduct. Epictetus would call this progress. Not happiness, progress. And progress is enough. So don't rush to label what happened as failure or abandonment. Let time, reflection, and discipline reveal its function. Trust that removal is sometimes rescue you weren't ready to request. Stand where you are. Strengthen what remains. Act in accordance with reason. And remember this: what left your life did not take your future with it. It cleared the path so you could finally walk it unburdened. Number 3. Distance revealed who never had pure intentions. Distance has a way of revealing truths you were too close to see. When certain people faded from your life, it didn't happen by accident, and it wasn't cruelty disguised as fate. It was clarity arriving quietly. You didn't lose them, you were released from them. What felt like absence was actually exposure. When the noise stopped, intention became visible. Wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Distance was not a punishment. It was the way forward. When you're emotionally close, you rationalize, you excuse, you explain away small inconsistencies and quiet discomforts. Proximity blurs judgment. Stoicism teaches that attachment clouds perception, not because you are weak, but because you are human. Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Sometimes improvement begins when you stop defending bonds that no longer align with your character. Distance removes the pressure to perform, to please, to maintain an image. And in that stillness, you start to notice who only showed up when it benefited them, who thrived on access rather than alignment, who needed your presence more than they respected your peace. You didn't see it before because you were involved, because you cared, because you were invested. That doesn't make you, it makes you sincere. But sincerity without discernment is expensive. When distance enters, the mask slips without confrontation. You stop reaching and suddenly the silence speaks. You stop initiating and patterns form on their own. Seneca observed, time discovers truth. Distance is time accelerated. It compresses reality into something undeniable. You don't have to accuse anyone. You don't have to analyze endlessly. You simply watch who remains consistent without proximity, who respects boundaries without resentment, who doesn't require constant access to stay genuine. This is where faith and Stoicism quietly meet. Whether you call it God, providence, or the rational order of nature, Stoics believe that events unfold according to a deeper logic beyond your immediate understanding. Trusted this completely. Whatever happens to you has been waiting to happen since the beginning of time. The removal wasn't random. It was protective. What you couldn't see clearly up close was gently moved away so it could be seen plainly. Distance didn't change people. It revealed them. There's a temptation to interpret separation as rejection. Resist that instinct. Stoicism teaches you to examine judgments before accepting them as truth. Ask yourself what actually happened. Someone is no longer present, that's a fact. The meaning you assign to it determines your suffering or your growth. When you frame distance as loss, you cling. When you frame it as revelation, you evolve. Epictetus reminded his students, don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do. Acceptance is not resignation. It's alignment with reality. You may notice how peace slowly replaces confusion once distance settles in. Not dramatic peace, quiet peace. The kind that doesn't announce itself. That's your nervous system recalibrating. That's your intuition no longer by constant interaction. When someone never had pure intentions, their absence creates relief before it creates clarity. Pay attention to that. Stoics valued inner tranquility above social approval, because tranquility is a signal that you are living according to reason, not compulsion. This doesn't mean everyone who leaves is malicious. Stoicism doesn't teach paranoia. It teaches discernment. Some people are simply meant for a season, but those without pure intentions always struggle with distance because distance demands integrity. Without proximity, manipulation loses leverage. Without constant access, inconsistency becomes obvious. Without your energy, their motives are exposed. Seneca wrote, associate with people who are likely to improve you. Distance helps you identify who never intended to. Now comes the work. Distance alone is not enough. Reflection must follow. Otherwise, you risk repeating the pattern with new faces. Start with a daily practice of stillness. Sit quietly for a few minutes and review your interactions without emotion. Ask yourself where you felt drained, where you felt pressured, where you felt subtly smaller. Don't justify, don't explain, just notice. This is Stoic self-audit, something practiced relentlessly in his private writings. Another exercise is voluntary restraint. Reduce unnecessary outreach, not as punishment, as observation. Let relationships breathe. See which ones survive without constant effort from you. This isn't withdrawal from life, it's of investment. Epictetus taught that freedom begins where dependence ends. By limiting how much access you grant, you protect your time, your focus, and your character. You should also practice reframing loss into alignment. Each time you catch yourself thinking, "Why did they leave?" replace it with, "What did their absence make clear?" This shifts your mind from scarcity to wisdom, from longing to learning. Stoicism is not about emotional numbness, it's about emotional accuracy. When you interpret distance correctly, it becomes a teacher rather than a wound. Faith adds another layer here. Trust that what was removed was unable to walk with you into the person you're becoming. You don't need to vilify anyone to honor that truth. Again offers grounding. Begin the morning by saying to yourself, "I shall meet with interference, ingratitude, insolence." He wasn't pessimistic. He was prepared. Distance prepares you. It trains you to choose depth over familiarity, alignment over attachment, virtue over convenience. What matters now is that you don't rush to fill the space. Silence after separation is fertile ground. Use it. Strengthen your routines. Clarify your values. Decide what behavior you no longer negotiate with. Stoicism teaches that character is revealed by what you tolerate. Distance gives you the rare chance to reset that standard consciously. You are not behind, you are being redirected. You are not abandoned, you are being protected. Distance did not empty your life, it refined it. Trust that. Honor it. Move forward lighter, clearer, and more disciplined in where you place your energy. The lesson has already been delivered. Your task now is to live in a way that proves you learned it. Number 4, silence exposed hidden disrespect. Silence exposed hidden disrespect long before you were ready to admit it. Not because silence is passive, but because it removes the noise that kept blinding you. When words fall away, truth has nowhere to hide. You stop explaining yourself. You stop smoothing over discomfort. You stop rescuing other people from revealing who they really are. And in that stillness, what was once subtle becomes obvious. What was once confusing becomes clear. As wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Silence clears those thoughts. It strips away excuses. It lets reality speak without interruption. You weren't wrong for missing it at first. When you talk too much, tolerate too much, or constantly adjust yourself to keep the peace, disrespect disguises itself as misunderstanding. But silence changes the rules. When you stop chasing clarity through words, you start receiving it through behavior. Epictetus warned, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit. Silence ends that complicity. It withdraws your emotional permission. And when that happens, hidden disrespect surfaces on its own, without confrontation, without drama, without you needing to accuse or defend. This is where Stoicism and faith quietly meet. God didn't remove people to punish you. He removed them because silence allowed the truth to rise, and once seen, it could no longer be ignored. When you stopped bending, stopped filling gaps with your effort, the imbalance revealed itself. Disrespect thrives when you compensate for it. Silence stops the compensation. Seneca wrote, "The wise man is content with himself." Contentment makes you less negotiable. And that alone unsettles anyone who benefited from your self-doubt. Silence doesn't argue, it observes. It listens beyond words. It notices tone, timing, absence, and presence. When you grow quieter, you become sharper. You start seeing patterns instead of isolated moments. You start recognizing how often your energy was expected but not reciprocated, how often your patience was assumed, how often your boundaries were tested under the disguise of familiarity. Silence doesn't create disrespect. It reveals what was already there. There's a reason this process feels uncomfortable. Silence removes your ability to lie to yourself. As long as you're talking, justifying, or hopping, things will change. If you say the right thing, you can avoid the truth. But when you go quiet, you're forced to confront what remains. Reminded himself, you always own the option of having no opinion. Silence is the practical expression of that. You don't rush to label. You don't rush to forgive prematurely. You don't rush to fix what isn't yours to fix. You let reality show its hand. This is also where respect begins to separate from attachment. When you stop speaking unnecessarily, you stop chasing validation. You stop signaling that access to you is unlimited. And when that happens, people either rise to the level of respect required or they fall away. Not because you pushed them out, but because silence stopped shielding them. God saw what you couldn't because silence aligned you with discernment instead of emotion. You might feel tempted to break the silence just to restore comfort. Don't. Comfort isn't always truth. Stoicism teaches that discomfort is often the doorway to wisdom. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." Silence is embodiment. It's you choosing inner order over external approval. It's you trusting that clarity doesn't need volume. When you stop reacting, disrespect loses its camouflage. It can't hide behind jokes, excuses, or selective kindness anymore. Silence also teaches you patience, and patience sharpens judgment. When you don't rush to respond, you create space between stimulus and response. In that space, your values speak louder than your emotions. You start acting from alignment instead of fear. Seneca wrote, "He who suffers before it is necessary, suffers more than is necessary." Silence reduces unnecessary suffering by refusing to engage in battles that only exist to drain you. To turn this into a habit, start practicing intentional restraint. When you feel the urge to clarify yourself, pause. Ask yourself whether clarity is needed or whether silence will reveal more. Often it will. Practice shortening your responses. Not coldly, not defensively, but cleanly. Let your words carry weight by using fewer of them. This trains you to trust yourself instead of for acceptance. Another practice is silent reflection. At the end of each day, sit quietly and review moments where silence gave you information words never could. Not to judge, but to learn. Use writing for this. You can use stillness. Ask yourself what was revealed when you didn't interfere. This strengthens discernment and reduces emotional. You can also practice energetic boundaries. Silence isn't just about not speaking, it's about not chasing. When you stop initiating where effort isn't mutual, silence becomes a test. Respect passes it. Disrespect fails it. No announcement needed. No explanation required. God removes what no longer aligns once you stop forcing alignment yourself. Understand this clearly. Silence is not withdrawal from life. It's withdrawal from illusion. It's the moment you stop negotiating your worth. When you quiet yourself, you hear what matters, you feel what's real, and what doesn't belong slowly loses its grip. As said, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Silence honors both. So adopt this habit deliberately. Speak less, observe more. React slower, reflect deeper. Let silence expose what words were hiding. Trust that when God removes people after silence enters your life, it's not loss, it's protection, it's alignment, it's clarity earned through restraint. And once you've seen the truth, you no longer need noise to validate it. Number 5, their absence created space for your strength to rise. There are moments in life when loss feels like punishment, when removal feels cruel, when silence from above feels like abandonment. But what if what left your life wasn't taken from you, but taken for you? The Stoics believed that the universe does nothing without reason, even when the reason is hidden from your limited sight. Reminded himself, whatever happens to you is for the good of the whole. You didn't lose something because you were weak. You lost it because you were ready to stand without it. Their absence didn't break you. It cleared the ground so your strength could finally surface. You couldn't see it at the time because attachment clouds judgment. When people or influences stay too close, they often become crutches without you realizing it. You lean, you soften, you delay your own growth because something external is doing emotional labor for you. Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Growth demands solitude. It demands friction. It demands the uncomfortable space where excuses have nowhere to hide. When they were removed, that space opened. Empty at first, quiet, almost unbearable, but that emptiness wasn't a void, it was an invitation. Strength doesn't rise in crowded rooms. It rises when you're forced to hear your own thoughts clearly, when there's no one left to validate your hesitation or absorb your uncertainty. God didn't remove them to hurt you. He removed them because they were occupying space meant for your backbone, for your resolve, for your discipline. Seneca wrote, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. Their absence became your resistance training. Every day without them asked you a single question. Who are you when nothing is propping you up? At first, you may have mistaken that question for loneliness. But loneliness and solitude are not the same. Loneliness says you are incomplete. Solitude says you are being assembled. When the noise left, your inner voice got louder. Not always kinder, but clearer. You started seeing patterns you ignored before. Weak habits, avoided responsibilities, comfort disguised as safety. Without them there, you had no one to blame and no one to lean on. That's when strength begins its quiet work, not dramatic. Not instant, but real. The Stoics never prayed for easy paths. They trained for resilient minds. Wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Their departure was the impediment, and it became the way. It forced you to develop emotional self-reliance, to sit with discomfort without numbing it, to act without applause, to make decisions without reassurance. These are not small skills. They are the foundation of inner authority. And inner authority is what allows you to move through life without being shattered by change. You may still replay the moment they left, wondering what you could have done differently. That rumination feels productive, but it often is. Stoicism teaches you to focus on what is within your control now, not what is frozen in the past. Epictetus was clear. Do not seek for events to happen as you wish, but wish for them to happen as they do. Acceptance isn't resignation. It's alignment. When you stop arguing with reality, you reclaim your energy. And that reclaimed energy is exactly what fuels your rise. Notice what began to emerge after the loss. More clarity, more hunger, more self-respect. Even if it came wrapped in pain, it came with purpose. Strength doesn't announce itself. It builds quietly through repetition, through choosing discipline over distraction, through choosing truth over comfort. Their absence demanded that you become consistent because inconsistency now had consequences. You had to show up for yourself. And once you do that long enough, you stop feeling abandoned and start feeling forged. There's also a spiritual dimension here that the Stoics would recognize even if they used different language. Call it providence, call it nature, call it God. The principle is the same. You are not random, and neither are the events shaping you. Trusted this deeply. Trust that everything happens as it should, and you will find peace. When something is removed, it's often because it no longer aligns with who you are becoming. You couldn't see the mismatch because you were still attached to who you used to be. God saw further, so he cleared the path. Now the responsibility shifts to you. Space alone doesn't create strength. What you do with that space does. This is where practice matters. Begin with daily stillness. 5 minutes. No distractions. Sit and observe your thoughts without judgment. This trains you to be alone without escaping yourself. Next, commit to one discipline you've been avoiding, not 10. 1. Do it daily, regardless of mood. Seneca advised, set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare. Voluntary discomfort builds voluntary strength. Another practice is honest self-dialogue. Write 1 page a day answering a single question. What did today demand of me that I tried to avoid? Don't beautify the answer. Don't perform. This exercise sharpens self-trust. When you face yourself without flinching, you become harder to deceive and harder to derail. Strength grows fastest when excuses are no longer tolerated. You may eventually realize something unsettling and liberating at the same time. Had they stayed, you might have remained smaller, softer, more dependent. Their presence may have delayed your evolution. Their absence accelerated it. That doesn't mean they were evil or unnecessary. It means their role had an expiration date, and once it passed, staying would have cost you yourself. So don't rush to fill the space they left. Don't crowd it with noise, substitutes, or distractions. Let it work on you. Let it stretch you. Let it demand more from you than comfort ever did. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. The strength rising in you now isn't borrowed, it's earned. And once earned, it cannot be taken away. Stand in that space with intention. Build in it. Train in it. This is the ground where your next version is forming. And this time, you won't need anyone else to hold you up. Number 6. You were spared a future full of regret. You don't see it at first. When someone is removed from your life, when a path collapses, when something you wanted slips through your fingers, the mind rushes to label it as loss. But Stoicism asks you to pause before you name anything good or bad. Wrote, wait for the judgment of reason. What if what left was not taken from you but taken away for you? What if you were spared a future full of quiet compromises, slow erosion, and regrets that would have cost you far more than the pain you feel now? You tend to imagine regret as something loud and dramatic, but most regret is subtle. It's the slow realization that you abandoned your values to maintain comfort. It's waking up years later and recognizing that you tolerated what you once promised yourself you never would. You don't feel it all at once. It arrives in fragments. Stoicism teaches you to think long-term, to zoom out beyond the momentary sting. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Anything that slowly pulls you away from self-mastery, even if it feels familiar or emotionally charged, is not a gift. It's a debt accumulating interest. When something or someone is removed, it often interrupts a future version of you that would have been trapped in constant justification, explaining, enduring, rationalizing why this is just how things are. That's the soil where regret grows. You may not have seen it then, but life has a way of closing doors you're too emotionally invested to shut yourself. Call it God, call it fate, call it providence. The Stoics called it logos, the rational order of the universe. Different names, same principle. Not everything that disappears was meant to stay. Seneca wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." But there's another courage that matters just as much, the courage to be redirected. When something is removed, it forces you to confront a truth you may have been postponing. Not everything that feels good leads somewhere good. Not everything that feels safe is aligned with your highest self. What was spared wasn't just time. It was the slow dulling of your standards, the quiet resentment of knowing, deep down, that you settled. Regret is born when your future self looks back and asks, "Why didn't I listen sooner?" Stoicism trains you to listen now, to recognize that pain in the present can be protection in disguise. Reminded himself, whatever happens to you has been waiting to happen since the beginning of time. That doesn't mean passivity. It means trust paired with responsibility. Trust that what left cleared space. Responsibility to not fill that space with the same patterns wearing a different mask. This is where your work begins. not in replaying what was lost, but in refining your judgment. Ask yourself, not with bitterness, but with honesty, what compromises were forming quietly, what boundaries were being softened, what version of you was being delayed. You don't need to accuse, you just need to see. Stoicism isn't about blaming people or fate. It's about reclaiming agency, about realizing that the removal wasn't random, it was corrective. There's a discipline here you must adopt, reframing loss as instruction. Not everything that ends was a mistake, but everything that ends has something to teach. Seneca said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." This moment is training you to value alignment over attachment, to prefer inner peace over familiar chaos, to understand that regret doesn't come from missing people, it comes from missing yourself. You were spared the version of life where you kept shrinking to maintain harmony, where your intuition kept knocking and you kept silencing it, where you would have looked functional on the outside but felt fractured inside. That future didn't announce itself as tragedy. It would have arrived politely, slowly, and by the time you noticed, it would have felt too late to change. What left saved you from that delay? Now you must honor that removal with action. Start with daily reflection. Each evening, ask yourself one question often implied in his meditations. Did I live today in accordance with my values? Not your moods, not your fears, your values. Write them down if you must. Clarity is a form of protection. Next, practice voluntary discomfort. Stoicism teaches this not as punishment, but as freedom training. Choose small acts that remind you that comfort is optional, but character is not. This sharpens discernment and reduces the likelihood of future regret. Another practice is negative visualization, not to dwell in fear, but to sharpen gratitude and foresight. Imagine the version of you that stayed stuck, not vividly, not emotionally, just conceptually. Then contrast it with who you are becoming now. This isn't about relief, it's about resolve. Resolve to not waste the clarity you've been given. Most importantly, adopt patience with the process. Just because you were spared regret doesn't mean the reward appears immediately. Stoicism never promised instant compensation. It promised long-term peace. Epictetus said, "First learn the meaning of what you say and then speak." In the same way, first learn the meaning of what was removed before rushing to replace it. Space is not emptiness, it's preparation. You don't need to fully understand why it happened yet. Understanding often arrives later. What matters now is how you respond. Will you trust that the interruption was intentional? Will you rise to meet the higher standard life is inviting you into? Or will you chase familiarity just to avoid the discomfort of growth? You were spared a future where regret would have whispered to you every night. A future where you knew you could have chosen differently but didn't. That future is gone. In its place is responsibility, clarity, and a quiet opportunity to live more deliberately than before. Take it seriously, take it slowly, take it with discipline. This wasn't a loss, this was an intervention. Number 7, attachment was blinding your judgment. Attachment was blinding your judgment, even though at the time it felt like clarity. That's the quiet trap of attachment. It disguises itself as loyalty, love, duty, or patience, while slowly dulling your ability to see what is. When you're attached, you don't observe reality, you negotiate with it. You soften truths. You reinterpret signals. You explain away what keeps repeating. And the more invested you become, the harder it gets to admit that your vision is compromised. The Stoics warned about this long before modern psychology gave it names. Epictetus said it plainly. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. What he meant is that clarity often requires letting go of what flatters the ego and facing what it doesn't want to see. Attachment narrows your field of awareness. It pulls your attention toward what you want to preserve rather than what needs to be understood. You stop asking, "Is this aligned with virtue?" and start asking, "How do I make this work?" That shift is subtle but dangerous. Reminded himself, you always own the option of having no opinion. Attachment steals that option. It pressures you into constant internal commentary, justification, and emotional bargaining. And when your judgment is clouded, you don't notice the slow erosion of your peace. You just feel heavier, less clear, less steady. From a Stoic lens, attachment isn't about caring, it's about clinging. Caring comes from strength. Clinging comes from fear, fear of loss, fear of emptiness, fear of facing yourself without the distraction. Seneca warned, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Attachment fuels that suffering by convincing you that letting go would be unbearable, even when holding on is already costing you your calm. You confuse familiarity with truth, comfort with correctness. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your standards slip, not because you lack wisdom, but because attachment keeps whispering that this time will be different if you just try harder. This is where the idea of God, or a higher order, intersects with Stoicism in a powerful way. The Stoics believed in a rational universe governed by logos, a natural intelligence that unfolds events according to reason, not preference. When something is removed from your life, it's not random. It's not punishment, it's correction. Wrote, whatever happens to you has been waiting to happen since the beginning of time. What you couldn't see clearly, life revealed through subtraction. What attachment hid, reality exposed by force. Attachment makes you negotiate with warning signs. It convinces you to delay decisions you already understand at a deeper level. And when clarity refuses to arrive voluntarily, it arrives through loss. Not to break you, but to free you. God saw what your attachment wouldn't allow you to admit. He saw the distortion, the imbalance, the way your inner alignment was slowly bending to preserve something external, so it was removed. Not because you were wrong to care, but because you were losing yourself in the process. Stoicism teaches that judgment is the only thing fully under your control, yet attachment hands that control away. It lets emotion sit in the judge's seat. Epictetus warned, when we are hindered or disturbed, let us never blame others but ourselves, that is, our judgments. This isn't blame, it's power. Once you see that attachment warped your judgment, you reclaim the ability to choose differently next time. You stop romanticizing what drains you. You stop spiritualizing what weakens you. You stop calling lessons bad luck when they're actually course corrections. There's an uncomfortable clarity that comes after attachment breaks. At first, the mind wants to rush back to rebuild the same structure with new promises. Resist that urge. Stillness is where insight settles. Silence is where you finally hear what was drowned out by wanting. Seneca wrote, the whole future lies in uncertainty. Live immediately. Living immediately doesn't mean chasing replacements. It means facing what is without filters, without longing, without bargaining. This is where your judgment sharpens again. To train this clarity, you need deliberate inner practices. Start with negative visualization, a Stoic exercise that loosens attachment. Each day, briefly imagine life without what you cling to, not dramatically, not emotionally, but calmly. This isn't to create fear. It's to remind yourself that your stability must not depend on externals. Did this to strengthen gratitude without dependence. When you rehearse impermanence, attachment loosens its grip and judgment regains balance. Another practice is value alignment. Ask yourself regularly, is my peace increasing or decreasing around this attachment? Not your excitement, not your hope, your peace. The Stoics measured progress by inner tranquility, not emotional highs. Write the answer honestly. Don't argue with it, just record it. Over time, patterns emerge and judgment becomes harder to deceive. You should also practice voluntary restraint. Temporarily step back emotionally, even in thought. Reduce mental replay. Reduce internal arguments. This isn't avoidance, it's reclaiming attention. Epictetus said, if you seek tranquility, do less. Doing less mentally is just as important as doing less externally. When you stop feeding attachment with constant attention, clarity begins to return on its own. What you eventually realize is this: attachment didn't make you loyal, it made you blind. And blindness always leads to collision. God removing something is not abandonment, it's mercy disguised as disruption. It's reality intervening where your judgment couldn't. Once you accept that, resentment softens into understanding. You stop asking, "Why was this taken from me?" and start asking, "What clarity am I being trained to hold next?" This is where growth becomes inevitable. You no longer grip tightly. You observe more. You choose slower. You respect your inner signals instead of overriding them. And when attachment tries to return in a new form, you recognize the feeling sooner: the narrowing, the bargaining, the quiet loss of peace. This time, you don't need life to force clarity on you. You already have it. Let this be the habit you build now. Never let attachment outrank judgment. Care deeply but see clearly. Love fully but stay sovereign. Trust God's removals, not because they're painless, but because they restore vision. What was taken wasn't meant to blind you anymore. And what remains is you, clearer, steadier, and finally able to see straight again. Number 8. Peace required separation, not compromise. Peace required separation, not compromise. That idea can feel uncomfortable at first because you've been taught quietly, repeatedly, that harmony is achieved by bending, by meeting halfway, by softening your edges until nothing sharp remains. But deep down, you already know the truth. There are moments when compromise doesn't bring peace, it drains it. There are connections that don't ask for understanding, they ask for self-erasure. And when those connections fall away, it isn't always loss. Sometimes it's clarity, sometimes it's protection, sometimes it's God removing what your attachment refused to release. The Stoics understood this long before it was dressed up in modern language. Wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will gladly change, but I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed." Notice the precision. Change is welcomed when it aligns with truth, not when it violates it. Peace doesn't come from endless adjustment, it comes from alignment. When a situation demands that you abandon your principles just to keep proximity, separation becomes an act of self-respect, not stubbornness. You may have tried to make it work by negotiating with your values, lowering standards, silencing instincts, reframing discomfort as maturity, but the body knows before the mind admits it. When something repeatedly costs you your calm, your focus, your sense of self, it's not asking for better communication. It's signaling misalignment. Epictetus was blunt about this. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Walking away will rarely be applauded. But peace was never designed to be crowdsourced. Separation is often framed as failure, yet the Stoics saw it as discernment. They believed that tranquility comes from knowing what is within your control and what must be released. You can't control how others behave, what they demand, or how they respond when you stop accommodating them. But you can control your participation. You can choose not to keep negotiating with what diminishes you. Seneca warned, "No man can have a peaceful life who thinks too much about lengthening it." In the same way, no one finds peace by endlessly extending situations that poison the present. There's a spiritual dimension to this that Stoicism and faith quietly agree on. Sometimes God doesn't explain, He subtracts. He removes people, dynamics, and attachments not as punishment, but as mercy. What you called loss was often protection delayed. What felt like abandonment was actually alignment being restored. Peace required separation because compromise would have cost you the very thing you were praying for: inner stillness. This is where the real shift happens. You stop asking, "How do I make this work?" and start asking, "Why am I forcing myself to adapt to something that keeps breaking me?" That question alone changes everything. Reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Separation is the external reflection of an internal decision, a decision to stop negotiating with unrest, a decision to stop mistaking endurance for virtue. You don't need to harden your heart to do this. You need to clarify it. Separation doesn't mean bitterness. It means boundaries enforced without apology. It means choosing distance over dysfunction. It means understanding that peace is not passive. It's maintained, guarded, chosen again and again. When compromise asks you to tolerate what erodes your spirit, separation becomes the only honest response. There's also grief here, and it's important not to bypass it. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared enough about your future self to stop betraying them. Seneca wrote, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today." When you cling to what was or what might be, you postpone peace indefinitely. Separation brings you back to the present, to what is, to who you are when you're not constantly adjusting. To practice this in your daily life, start with a simple but uncomfortable exercise. Write down what costs you peace, not what annoys you, what consistently unsettles you. Then write down what you've been compromising to keep it around. Be honest. No performance. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. Next, practice internal separation before external separation. Detach emotionally before you detach physically. Reduce the mental energy you give to what disturbs you. Advised himself to do this constantly, reminding his mind not to wander into unnecessary disturbance. Each time your thoughts drift back toward what you've already identified as misaligned, gently redirect them. This is discipline. This is Stoic training. Another practice is values anchoring. Choose 3 principles you refuse to compromise: calm, integrity, self-respect, for example. When faced with a decision, measure it against those anchors. If staying requires betrayal of them, you already have your answer. You don't need drama. You don't need justification. Peace doesn't argue. It withdraws. Understand this. Separation is not rejection of others, it's acceptance of reality. It's acknowledging that not everything meant to teach you is meant to stay with you. God saw what you couldn't because attachment clouds perception. Distance restores it. When the noise fades, you hear yourself again. And in that silence, peace finally has room to arrive. So take action. Stop compromising with what costs you your center. Stop calling exhaustion loyalty. Stop negotiating with unrest. Choose separation where necessary, not out of anger but out of clarity. This is not you giving up. This is you finally choosing peace over performance, alignment over approval, truth over comfort. And that choice, repeated daily, is where real strength lives. Number 9, the lesson mattered more than the relationship. Sometimes what hurts the most isn't the loss itself, but the confusion that follows it. You keep asking why. Why that person had to leave. Why things fell apart when you were trying to hold them together. Why something that felt meaningful was taken from you without explanation. And yet, when you step back and quiet the noise, a deeper truth begins to surface. The lesson mattered more than the relationship. Not because the relationship was meaningless, but because you were never meant to stay the same person you were when it began. The Stoics understood this tension well. Wrote, "What happens to you has been waiting to happen since the beginning of time." That includes loss. That includes separation. That includes the quiet removal of people who could no longer walk with the version of you that needed to emerge. When you frame life this way, you stop seeing endings as punishments and start seeing them as instructions. God didn't remove them to hurt you. He removed them because the attachment was blinding you to what you needed to learn. You tend to cling to relationships because of familiarity, not alignment. Comfort can disguise itself as destiny, but Stoicism teaches you to value growth over comfort, virtue over pleasure, truth over attachment. Epictetus warned, Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and your life will go smoothly. When someone exits your life, the immediate instinct is resistance. You want to negotiate with reality. You want explanations, apologies, closure. But the Stoic path asks something harder and far more powerful: acceptance paired with reflection. The lesson often arrives wrapped in discomfort. It might be teaching you boundaries you refuse to set. It might be forcing you to confront self-betrayal you normalized. It might be stripping away dependency so you can finally stand on your own inner foundation. Whatever it is, the relationship was never the destination. It was the classroom. And once the lesson was delivered, staying longer would have only delayed your evolution. You don't like hearing that because part of you still wants the story to continue. That's human, but growth rarely asks for permission. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." The pain you felt wasn't random. It was friction designed to sharpen you, to wake you up, to force you to ask better questions about who you are, what you tolerate, and why you settle for less than your own integrity. When God removes someone from your life, it's often because your focus drifted outward instead of inward. You started measuring your worth by their presence, their approval, their consistency. Stoicism reminds you that nothing external should have that power. Said, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. The relationship exposed an attachment. The loss exposes the cure. This is where responsibility enters. Not blame, responsibility. You take responsibility for what the experience revealed about you, where you ignored intuition, where you compromised values, where you delayed necessary change. This shift is crucial. The moment you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" you reclaim control. You move from victimhood to authorship. There is also a spiritual dimension to this that Stoicism never. The Stoics believed in a rational order to the universe, a logos, a divine intelligence woven into events. To them, trusting that order wasn't passive faith. It was disciplined surrender. Reminded himself, whatever happens to you is good for the whole, which is good for you. God sees patterns you cannot yet see. He sees where you're headed, not just where you've been. Sometimes removal is protection disguised as loss. You may not feel grateful yet. That's okay. Gratitude often comes later after understanding catches up with emotion. For now, what matters is posture. Are you resisting the lesson or receiving it? Are you replaying the absence or integrating the insight? Stoicism teaches you to focus on what is within your control. You cannot undo what ended, but you can extract its meaning. You can decide that the pain will not be wasted. Here, where practice matters, start with daily reflection. Each evening, sit quietly and ask yourself one question: what did this experience reveal about my character? Not about the other person, about you. Write the answer honestly. No excuses, no self-pity, just clarity. Seneca believed that reviewing your day was essential to moral progress. This exercise sharpens awareness and turns loss into wisdom. Next, practice voluntary detachment, not coldness, detachment. Remind yourself daily that people are not possessions. They are travelers who may walk beside you for a season. Epictetus taught, when you kiss your child or your wife, say to yourself that you are kissing a mortal. The point wasn't morbidity, it was freedom. When you accept impermanence, you love without clinging and lose without collapsing. Another practice is value reinforcement. Write down the principles you refuse to abandon again: integrity, self-respect, emotional discipline, truth. These become your compass. The relationship tested these values. The lesson clarified them. Live accordingly. Let future connections align with who you've become, not who you used to be. You also need to practice silence with your own mind. Stop rehearsing alternate endings. Stop bargaining with the past. Warned against this mental habit when he said, Do not waste the remainder of your life in thoughts about others. Your energy is finite. Spend it on building the version of yourself that no longer needs the lesson to repeat itself. Understand this clearly. If the lesson mattered more than the relationship, it's because you are meant to carry the wisdom forward, not the wound. God didn't remove them to leave you empty. He removed them to make room. Room for strength. Room for clarity. Room for a life governed by principle instead of attachment. You don't move forward by forgetting. You move forward by integrating. Let the experience refine you. Let it sober you. Let it elevate your standards. The Stoics believed that every obstacle contains material for virtue. Loss is no exception. If you allow it, this ending will become the foundation of a stronger beginning. So take action now. Reflect, detach, clarify, commit. Don't rush to replace what was removed. Build what was missing within you first. Trust that what aligns with your growth will not need to be forced. And remember, when the lesson is learned, the pain loses its authority. That's not faith alone. That's Stoic wisdom lived. Number 10. What was removed was never aligned with your path. There's a quiet truth you only recognize after resistance fades. What was removed from your life was never aligned with your path. It felt sudden, unfair, even cruel at first. Your mind replayed it endlessly, trying to bargain with reality, trying to understand why something you valued was taken away. But Stoicism reminds you that the universe does not act randomly. Wrote, "Whatever happens to you has been waiting to happen since the beginning of time." What left was not a loss, it was a correction. And sometimes, God removes what you are not strong enough to walk away from on your own. You couldn't see the misalignment because attachment clouds perception. When something feels familiar, desired, or emotionally charged, your judgment bends to protect it. Epictetus warned, "We suffer not from events but from our opinions about them." You believed that what was taken belonged on your journey, so its removal felt like punishment. But alignment is not about comfort. It's about coherence between who you are becoming and what you allow to stay. God sees the full arc of your life. You only see the moment. And when something threatens the direction of your character, your peace, or your discipline, it cannot stay, no matter how convincing it once seemed. This is where faith and Stoicism quietly meet. The Stoics didn't beg reality to change. They trained themselves to accept what is removed as necessary. Not good, not bad, necessary. Seneca said, "A good man is invincible, for he enters no contest in which he is not stronger." What was removed would have required you to fight against your own nature to keep it. You would have had to shrink, negotiate your values, delay your growth, or remain emotionally dependent. That alone tells you it was never aligned. Anything that demands you abandon your inner order cannot coexist with your destiny. You may still feel the echo of absence. That doesn't mean the removal was wrong. It means you're detoxing from attachment. Your nervous system hasn't yet caught up to your future. The Stoics understood this lag. Reminded himself, do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. When something is removed, it compresses time. It forces you to confront the present instead of hiding inside what used to be. God does this not to harm you, but to return you to now, where your power actually lives. What was removed also reveals something important about your responsibility. If it had truly been aligned, it would have strengthened your virtues, not weakened them. Stoicism places virtue at the center of a good life: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Ask yourself honestly, without drama or nostalgia, did what left help you cultivate these qualities, or did it quietly erode them? The answer matters. Because alignment is measured by who you become in the presence of something, not by how intensely you miss it when it's gone. There's also humility in accepting divine removal. It means admitting that your perspective was incomplete, that your desire outpaced your discernment. Epictetus was clear: if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Letting go of what God removed requires you to release the fantasy that you knew best at the time. That's not weakness. That's growth. You don't shame your past self. You thank them for surviving long enough to be corrected. Now comes the harder part, integrating the lesson instead of clinging to the wound. Removal is instruction. It teaches you what to stop negotiating with, what to stop romanticizing, what to stop chasing. But the lesson only sticks if you change your habits afterward. Otherwise, you'll keep attracting substitutes for what was removed. Stoicism demands action, not reflection alone. Wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." What was removed is now a guidepost, not backward, forward. Here's a practical exercise to anchor this truth. Sit quietly and write, without censoring yourself, what you believe was taken from you. Then write what it demanded from you emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Not what it gave, but what it cost. End the exercise by writing one sentence. This was not aligned because don't rush it. Let honesty replace longing. This isn't about convincing yourself. It's about seeing clearly. Another practice is daily alignment inventory. Each evening, ask yourself, did I act today in a way that supports the person I'm becoming? If the answer is yes, the removal is doing its job. If the answer is no, the work isn't finished yet. Seneca advised, each day acquire something that will fortify you against poverty, against death, indeed against other misfortunes as well. Alignment is built daily, not restored by wishing the past back. You're not meant to drag everything forward with you. Some things expire because they've completed their role. Others are removed because they never belonged in the first place. God doesn't subtract randomly. He subtracts precisely. When you stop arguing with the subtraction, you start noticing the clarity it leaves behind. Space, focus, direction. You breathe differently when what doesn't fit is gone. Trust this, if it was aligned, it would have stayed without costing you your peace. If it was essential, it would have grown with you instead of competing with your growth. And if it was meant to remain, no force could have taken it without taking you down with it. Said, accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. Fate also removes. Love that too. So stop looking backward for confirmation. Stop reopening doors that closed for your protection. Walk forward with discipline. Build habits that honor where you're going, not where you were interrupted. What was removed cleared the path. Your task now is simple but not easy. Walk it without resentment, without nostalgia, and without doubt. Alignment doesn't shout. It feels quiet, stable, clean. And once you taste that, you'll understand nothing that truly belonged to you was ever taken away. Before you leave, remember this. Nothing meaningful is ever taken from you by accident. What leaves your life often does so because it no longer belongs to the person you are becoming. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that loss is not always punishment. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's clarity. Sometimes it's life removing what would have delayed your growth, weakened your discipline, or kept you emotionally dependent on things you were never meant to carry. If someone walked away, if something collapsed, if a door closed without explanation, don't rush to resent it. Ask yourself who you are now because of it. Ask yourself what kind of strength was forged in that silence. What kind of self-respect emerged when you stopped chasing what refused to stay? You don't need to understand everything that was removed. You only need to trust that what remains is enough to move forward with calm, discipline, and purpose. As reminded us, you can choose how you respond, and that choice is where your power lives. So walk forward without bitterness, without clinging, without fear. What was taken made room for something greater, a stronger mind, a steadier heart, and a life aligned with who you truly are. If this message resonated with you, reflect on it today. And remember, nothing that truly belongs to you can ever be lost.